She didn't even look back. Not once. I watched her heels click down the hospital corridor, her silhouette disappearing around the corner like a chapter one hadn't realized was already over. And in that moment, with the scent of antiseptic still clinging to my clothes, and the echo of her departure ringing in my ears, her sister walked up beside me, slid her hand into mine, and whispered something so quietly, so deliberately, that it burned deeper than anything my wife had ever said. You always deserve better. And she knows it. I don't think I truly breathed again until hours later. It had been 72 hours of waiting, pacing, and silent praying outside an ICU door that felt more like a wall between two lives. My mother had suffered a stroke, massive, cruel, and sudden. I had dropped everything and rushed to her bedside, calling Elena as I drove. I remember the silence on the other end. I remember thinking the call dropped. I remember realizing, no, she was just quiet, just empty. It's your mom, not mine, she finally said. I'll come by later. Maybe. Elena hadn't always been like that. Or maybe she had. Maybe I had just spent years making excuses, weaving illusions out of scraps of old kindness and memories of when things felt good. Maybe I had built a castle out of sand and called it marriage. But over time, she had grown cold in ways I couldn't name, like living with someone who slowly forgets your face. And I, ever the fixer, ever the optimist, kept pouring love into a cup she held upside down. When I finally convinced her to visit the hospital, it was 2 days later. She showed up in office clothes, heels clicking, not a hair out of place, and with a look that said she had more important things to do. She kissed the air near my cheek, checked her phone twice before we even reached the ICU, and sighed dramatically when she had to fill out a visitor's badge. But I didn't say anything. I was tired. Tired in that bone-deep way that makes you numb. Elena sat for 10 minutes beside my mother's unconscious body, then stood up and said she was going to get coffee. I waited and waited. I texted her. Called. No answer. Then I watched the security camera feed at the nurse's station and saw her walking out. Leaving. No expression. Just gone. The nurse turned to me. She your wife? I nodded. The nurse didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. I don't remember sitting down. I don't remember crying, either. Just the dull ache of realization pressing on my chest like a weight I could never again put down. That's when Mara walked in. Elena's sister. The black sheep. The one who never came to family holidays and didn't care what anyone thought. She wore jeans and a leather jacket, her hair in a braid that looked like it had been slept on. She brought coffee, but not the hospital kind. Real stuff, from the good place down the street. She sat beside me and didn't ask questions. Just handed me a cup, sipped hers, and waited. And then, as if sensing some signal I couldn't detect, she stood, looked down the hallway, and saw Elena vanish around the corner. That's when she took my hand. That's when she leaned in. You always deserve better. And she knows it. It didn't feel like comfort. It felt like truth. Cold, heavy, and impossible to ignore. We didn't talk much after that. I stayed at the hospital. Mara came back the next morning. And the next. She brought snacks, magazines, a new blanket. She told the nurses jokes and got them to smile. She sat beside my mother, whispered stories into her ear like she was listening, and played her favorite songs from a playlist she made the night before. And Elena? Not a word. Not a visit. Not a text. 3 days later, my mother woke up. Slurred words, confused eyes, but alive. I cried on the bathroom floor for 20 minutes. Mara found me there and didn't say anything. She just sat beside me, back against the wall, and let the silence wrap around us like a blanket. I didn't go home for 5 more days. When I did, it was to a cold apartment and a post-it on the fridge, staying at a hotel for a while. Need space. I stared at that square of neon paper for a full 5 minutes. Then I picked it up, placed it in a drawer, and went to bed alone. But something had shifted. A crack had finally split all the way through the dam. And behind that crack, behind the heartbreak and exhaustion and disappointment, Something was building. Something steady, focused, quietly dangerous. And it all started with one whisper from the one person I least expected to believe in me. The morning I found the second hotel receipt was the morning I realized I hadn't been sleeping for months, just closing my eyes and borrowing unconsciousness from exhaustion. I was pulling laundry from our shared basket when a folded piece of paper fell from one of Elena's sweater sleeves. Not a crumpled receipt, neatly folded, intentionally preserved, dated last week. Different hotel name than the one on the post-it. Different city. I remember just sitting on the floor of the bedroom for maybe half an hour. Not crying, not angry, just numb, like my mind had finally run out of ways to lie to itself. There were no other explanations left. This wasn't space. This wasn't stress. This wasn't work. This was deliberate. This was betrayal wrapped in clean typography on hotel stationery. When I finally called her, I didn't ask where she was. I didn't ask who she was with. I simply asked her when she was planning on ending things. There was a pause, then the long inhale of someone about to play the victim in a movie they wrote themselves. You're being dramatic. You always overthink everything. I just needed time. And then your mother. It's all been so much. She didn't deny it. She didn't even try. That told me everything. And somehow, that calmness, that detached, deflecting tone, that's what did it. That's what flipped the switch. There was no grief left to pour into this woman. No fire, either. What I felt was cooler, sharper, cleaner. The kind of emotion that sees clearly and cuts precisely. Revenge didn't bloom from fury. It unfolded from clarity. I didn't tell her I found the receipt. I didn't say anything else. I just said, okay, take the space. Then I hung up. I called Mara. She answered on the first ring. I asked her to meet me for coffee. She didn't ask why. We sat at a little cafe 3 blocks from her place. I told her everything. The receipt, the way Elena spoke to me on the phone, the slow erosion of a relationship that had once made me feel seen, and now made me question if I ever really existed in it at all. Mara listened the way only someone who's lived in the shadow of someone shinier knows how to listen. No interruptions. No coddling. Just presence. When I finished, she looked at me the way she had in that hallway. That same quiet certainty. And she said, "So what are you going to do now?" And that's when the idea began. Not the revenge itself. Not yet. Just the seed. I didn't know what it would grow into, but I knew I couldn't just let it all slide into the past without reckoning. This wasn't about payback. This was about truth. About showing Elena who she had chosen to become and letting the mirror do the damage. Mara didn't ask for details. She just said, "Whatever you need, I'm in." And I believed her. The mistake people make is assuming revenge is loud. That it's screaming matches or public takedowns or dramatic confessions in crowded restaurants. Real revenge is never loud. It's the quiet things. The small truths that expose everything the louder lies tried to cover. That's where I started. I didn't want to ruin Elena's life. I just wanted her to feel it. To see herself the way I had come to see her. So I started with what she valued most. Image. Elena lived for perception. Her job, her social circle, her carefully curated Instagram page that made her life look like a perfume ad. Everything in her world was staged to appear effortless. And behind every photo, I now knew, was a lie she told herself to keep from seeing the real thing. So I gave her the real thing. The first step was subtle. I began gathering everything. Screenshots, texts, photos of receipts. I copied files from her shared desktop folder. Most of it was just fluff, but there were emails. One in particular between her and a coworker named Dan. I recognized the name. She had mentioned him once as that annoying guy in accounting. Judging by the emails, he was more than annoying. They weren't explicit, but the tone, the familiarity, the inside jokes, the hotel mentioned in one of the signatures, it was clear. I printed everything. Put it in a manila envelope. No note. No explanation. Just the evidence. And I dropped it off at her office reception anonymously. I timed it for the one day a week I knew the whole department had their morning meeting. When she walked into that office and saw the envelope on her desk, she would have no idea who it came from. But everyone around her, they'd see her reaction, her panic, her need to explain. I didn't hear from her that day, or the next. I didn't need to. But that was just the beginning. The second step was about the cracks in her real relationships. Elena had burned bridges quietly over the years, always thinking no one noticed. But people did. I reached out to one of her oldest friends, someone she had ghosted a year ago over something petty. I told her the truth, not about the cheating, just about the loneliness, the way Elena had withdrawn, become cold. I was honest, and the honesty connected. She told me she had been waiting for someone to say it. We talked for 2 hours. I didn't ask her to reach out to Elena, but I knew she would, and she did. And Elena, predictably, pushed her away. The third step was Mara, or rather, what Mara represented. Not a replacement, not a prize, but a contrast. Mara was warmth, realness, the kind of presence that didn't need to be posted or proven. And the more time we spent together, the more I realized Elena had been a performance, and Mara was the backstage truth I had missed all along. We didn't kiss. We didn't cross any lines. But one night, we were sitting on her balcony, sharing a bottle of cheap wine, and she looked at me with those steady eyes and said, "You know she's going to try to come back once she feels control slipping. Are you ready for that?" And I was, because I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. It was 2 weeks later when I got the first text. Simple, deceptively casual. "Hey, can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a full minute, then locked the phone. I wasn't ready to answer. Not because I wasn't sure what to say, but because I wanted her to sit in that silence, to feel the absence of control. A day passed, then another. The messages came slower, more uncertain. "I just want to explain. Please don't ignore me." And finally, I messed up. Only then did I respond. Not with words, but with a single photo. A picture of the hotel receipt she thought she'd hidden. No caption, no anger, just proof that I had known longer than she realized. She called immediately. I let it ring. Then she called again. And again. I answered on the third call. Her voice cracked like a bad connection. "Please, let me explain. I was lost. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought we were drifting, and I don't know. I made mistakes." I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I told her calmly that I knew about Dan. I knew about the lies. And I told her the worst part wasn't the cheating. It was the indifference. The way she abandoned me at the hospital. The way she looked through me when I needed her most. She cried. I listened. Then I told her I was filing for divorce. I didn't threaten. I didn't demand. I simply stated it as a fact already in motion. And it was. The papers had been drawn up. The lawyer was ready. The timeline was clean. Her voice changed then, from regret to panic. She asked if there was someone else. I told her no. There didn't need to be. "But you've been with Mara, haven't you?" I paused. "Mara has been there. That's all you need to know." The silence that followed was longer than any I had endured since the day in the ICU. And in that silence, I heard everything she couldn't say. Then I hung up. I didn't block her. I didn't erase our history. I just removed her access to me. One login at a time. One key returned at a time. One boundary drawn at a time. And every step felt like reclaiming a part of myself she had tried to convince me didn't exist. It took 6 months from the day I filed until the divorce was finalized. Clean on paper, ugly in silence. Elena stopped trying to contact me after the 4th week. I imagine she realized I wasn't bluffing, or maybe she just shifted the story to suit her next audience. That part never mattered. What mattered was how quiet everything became when the drama ended, and how loud the peace felt in its place. In those 6 months, I changed. And not in the forced, Instagram rebirth kind of way where you start drinking green juice and pretending heartbreak made you stronger. No, it was subtler. I learned how to live with silence. How to breathe in a room without trying to keep someone else comfortable. I learned how to cook just for me. How to walk slower. How to let a day unfold without planning it around someone else's volatility. Mara and I stayed close. Closer, really. She never pushed, never hinted at anything. We spent weekends hiking or rewatching terrible early 2000s thrillers. She'd fall asleep on the couch. I'd cover her with a blanket, and for a while that was enough. It felt honest. It felt earned. One Sunday morning, we were sitting on a bench at the park with coffee in hand, watching kids chase pigeons, when she said something I didn't expect. You know, she's probably still telling people you cheated on her with me. I nodded. I know. You care? I thought about it. About all the ways people twist things to protect themselves. About all the stories we tell when we can't face the truth. No, not really. Let her. Mara smiled, that kind of half smile she did when she knew I meant something bigger than I was saying. Because the truth was, I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Elena. Not even at myself. The person I had been in that marriage. The one who tolerated distance, who mistook neglect for independence, who convinced himself that love meant staying even when it hurt. He was gone, and I didn't need revenge to prove that. I just needed the mirror to stay clear. A few weeks after the divorce finalized, I got a call from Elena's old friend, the one I had reconnected with months ago. She said Elena had moved to a different city, started over. I wished her well, truly. Not because I forgave her, but because she no longer held space in my chest. There was nothing left to carry. Mara moved in 3 months later. Quietly. No big speeches. Just one evening. She brought a bag over, then a plant. Then one day, I realized the whole top drawer in my bathroom had her things. It fit. She fit. And one night, as we sat on the same hospital bench where I'd once waited alone, now visiting my mother in rehab as she made an almost miraculous recovery, Mara leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "Do you ever think about how it all started?" "All the time," I said. "Do you regret it?" I turned to her, brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I regret not waking up sooner, but I don't regret where I woke up." Because in the end, revenge wasn't about hurting Elena. It was about removing her from the pedestal I had built. It was about seeing clearly, choosing differently, and finally, choosing myself. And as I sat there with Mara, hearing the breeze stir the trees and the soft beep of the hospital monitors through the window, I realized something simple and freeing. The best revenge is not what you do to someone else. It's what you stop letting them do to you.